Hey, got paint on my hands today. What is success? Getting the job done, getting the fence painted, so that the quality of appearance meets my standard, right? Well, yes, but I was out in the garden, and so was my neighbor Jean, and we got to talking. Suzanne, her friend, was helping her dig up and put in some drainage lines. And I discovered that Suzanne needs work and could paint my fence for $15 an hour. So I went back to my office, realized it was a two-person job, and while Suzanne could do the hard stuff, I could be usefully around scraping, nailing, and cutting in. And it was pretty much a 3-day job. Could I spare that much time? Well, then I heard a voice saying, of all things, love your neighbor. So I reckoned, that's what being a human, and maybe especially a minister, is all about. How did I get so distracted from that? So often distracted. I should make the time, and I can and did intentionally. So I had 3 days of off and on again conversations with Suzanne on every subject, including my life, her life, weakness and failure, politics and hopes, gay struggles, house repairs, and our common need for a savior. And Jean saw that I cared about Suzanne, and now there's a healthy foundation for our relationship, and also the fence painting got done. In the end, it could cost more money and time than I might have liked as an efficient American doer, but the task was done. So my success goal was, 1, getting the job done, but also intentionally included, 2, building a caring relationship with Suzanne and my neighbor. That's a simple example that asks, what is success? Today we will emphasize, first, figuring out what is success for the other culture. And you can think about what that means for your own goals while coaching, etc. Our second emphasis, the locals know their system and you don't. We already know that you bring with you a certain workplace culture. One of their specific work sensibilities may include a non-American approach to risk-taking. And we'll look at that difference. And finally, 3, the emphasis here today will be you must intentionally develop new skills. This may seem obvious, but you may also think you have plenty of skills, and you do, and this is similar to learning on the job. But go as a learner, determined to work with culturally different others and within their system, or at least their sensibilities. That is, asking what makes sense to them. A March 2014 report from the U.S. Army says this. Note, they are talking about a small patrol of soldiers running into a few people in a local Afghanistan community. It says the only real way for soldiers to deal positively and proactively with the cultural differences they may encounter is for them to learn their way out. In other words, to develop skills in uncovering meanings as the interaction proceeds. The key to this approach is to focus on getting the right questions, rather than going in with a predetermined set of answers. In interactions between people from different cultural backgrounds, different core cultural values come into play, not in a preordained way, but in response to the needs and perceptions of the moment. So the cultural encounter, in other words, is an unfolding play that never happens the same way twice. A case. Dean Allen Foster describes the case of a Jordanian and an American trying to negotiate a successful deal. This is basically a story of the difficulty of crossing cultures in business, but it's told from the Arab's point of view. In this case, look for their essential differences, their sense of success, and what each might have to understand or to yield culturally in order to make the deal. So I'll call them Ahmed and Dougie. In everything he did, Ahmed seemed more like a stereotypical American wheeler dealer. He was young, had already had several export businesses, and had dealt a lot with Americans. He asserted, I know how to speak to Americans and Europeans. I don't have many problems with them either. He was exporting a cosmetic for women, a product natural to his country, one he was sure would appeal to Americans. The obstacle for Ahmed one American, Dougie. Dougie would not talk price. He began to think Dougie wasn't interested in negotiating a deal. But soon after that, Dougie called and the deal was on. Still, as they began to talk, the Arab had the feeling that the American was backing away from bargaining about price. Dougie seemed most interested in the quality of the product. I appreciated that concern, said Ahmed, but I had already answered all those questions. I'm hurt that he keeps asking. Ahmed felt that maybe Dougie was going to use the quality issue as a bargaining chip to lower the price, which would be insulting. Ahmed said there was another issue. Dougie was pressuring him for information on delivery quantity and dates, as if the American wanted to know everything about shipments for the next 2 years, even though the first order hadn't even been placed yet. How could anyone expect answers to these kinds of questions? Nevertheless, despite the strange questions, they were still having conversations, almost 2 months after the initial contact. Ahmed, feeling frustrated, wasn't sure it was going to be fruitful. Despite his own sense that he was an expert on Americans, Ahmed wanted to know, what's the problem with this American? Well, they had two different sets of needs. Can you imagine what conflicts and values might be driving the differences? Arabs are bargainers, but up until now, Ahmed had not experienced an American who resisted his prices, so he probably didn't expect it from this American. And while bargaining is less nuanced for Americans, we certainly do it. Dougie was first and foremost interested in quality. That concern, the way Ahmed heard it, meant something different to him. It meant the relationship he was developing was not important. Ahmed's honor and trust was at stake. Who would think he would sell anything shoddy to a business partner? In his mind, bargaining is about price, so there's no problem bargaining, but quality is about honor. If we're together in business, two honorable men, there should be no questions about quality. No one questions that. The Arab simply didn't see the greater need the American had. He was disinclined to admit issues of quality into the discussion. On the other hand, the American was unaware he was putting the relationship in jeopardy. The relationship was, for Ahmed, the heart of the deal. Americans like Dougie want a rational, dependable business plan. He wanted to strategize delivery dates, quantity of shipments, and retail pricing to customers over long periods of time. Arabs have a different view of planning, risk-taking, and taking control. The relationship would determine the future course of the events. The relationship would determine the future, not the planning. For Americans, the future of the relationship wasn't in the facts. It's not going further without more facts. I need hard information right now. How much can be delivered by when? For how long? For how much? Doug believes he is able to control the future, to plan for certain outcomes at certain times, and to take risks based on those plans and the information. This is not ish Allah, that is, if Allah wills. This is if Doug wills. For Ahmed, partners will continue to do business when the unpredictable and uncontrollable occur, and they certainly will occur. Business arrangements will be threatened by events beyond their control, by fate, but not their relationship. Do you see, one is together we make sense versus the other, which is if we transact the deal, then there will be success. For Dougie, they can plan to overcome any obstacles. So we can expect a shipment in 6 months. Humans can affect the world. For Ahmed, little humans are no match for things determined by Allah, the inevitable events of the world. It would be foolish to try to affect them. Ahmed's risk control is his built-in fear of inevitable, uncontrollable change. Dougie manages risk with a compulsion for statistical verifiability. He sees himself, as most Americans, as an individual with power to control his destiny, the master of his fate. This is quite foreign to the Arab view. In the end, with some cross-cultural counseling, Ahmed addressed the Americans' real needs. He was even willing to see the quality issue as a business need and not as a personal attack on his honor. He also learned that he could connect price, not negotiate it in isolation. So Dougie guaranteed larger orders when Ahmed offered a lower price. There were advantages for him when he recognized culturally built-in American needs. So for both of these business partners, the deal moved ahead quickly and successfully, as Ahmed tapped his newfound cultural awareness. But wait, if you order now, you can have both partners become culturally aware for the price of one. In this tale, we really only see Ahmed make a move to adjust and bring success. That's right, if you are the American, you can learn Ahmed's success need, or some other cultural person like him, and then build a relationship and add to the mutual success of the venture. Challenge, goals, success. What will success look like? What is top priority in your mission? Will you export American business to another place? Will you export capitalism? Inadvertently promote materialism? Will you market good feeling or bad feeling about America? Will other cultural people wonder, oh, American Christians, they're so different? Will you make friends and brothers? Will you grow together or just expect them to change? Will you make disciples, even as you yourself are being reshaped as a disciple? I think making disciples is your end goal. I also think it's inevitable that as you follow Jesus, not lead him, you will become a new kind of disciple and disciple maker. You will see yourself differently, and you will see how big the work of Christ is in the world. You will learn a bigger God. I believe that God can and will bring Christ into other cultures through your labors and through my labors in helping you. What are the possible outcomes? 1, disciples with no cultural context. You make disciples with no cultural context. Well, this is false, because there is no such thing as a disciple without a cultural context. We all live and move in a cultural context. Just like our businesses and workplaces are very American, so our churches are very American. Much American theologizing makes us think the gospel can be completely disenculturated, as if the gospel exists in a vacuum, hanging out in blank space, as if the kingdom doesn't exist in the world. The kingdom is in the world. Hallelujah! You are salt and light in the world, in a specific place, in your cultural context, or in the other cultural context, if you go there. The kingdom changes cultures, but the kingdom is not a culture in itself. You and I make up that kingdom, and we are in the world to be salt and light, not by words only, but by powerful acts of integrity in business, of loving, understanding others and their cultural ways, of relating to a brother or non-believer and valuing what the actions, objects, scenes, the processes of the world mean to them. Christ challenges us in every human being. So to live in the world before him as Lord. There are no disciples with no cultural context. Possible outcome number 2. The other culture gains American business. This is a fear of mine, because they might lose their own business culture, and American business may be all they gain. Number 3. Other culture gains Christ plus American business. In this scenario, they could still lose their own business culture. It envisions you making Americanized disciples and establishing an American-style business, if that will even work there. Well, hey, McDonald's does. These next possible outcomes are honestly what I think of as real successes. So number 4, disciples who can function in their own culture. They can communicate with people in their own culture, can read their Bible, can do business, and live before the Lord in the culture in which they've grown up. That's a good outcome. Number 5, another possible outcome. The other culture gains Christ with us. This means we are there in the other culture, following Christ and learning Christ himself in that other culture. Again, don't go there and expect the Christ of America. He is the same, but he is doing his work in that culture, in all its God-given glory and man-corrupted mess. But let me suggest 6, a possible best-end scenario, which is a synergistic culture that emerges from your labors and they gain Christ. It's in the relating and the doing that you bring Christ. And this synergistic way is one possible way. You bring American know-how. You really do come to understand their business culture. It's an amalgam. So this is the best end scenario. They gain Christ together with us in their culture. Their culture of business is informed by your American business culture know-how, but also by your relationship with Christ, so that they gain Christ in the local business culture, they own the business, and as it were, they own Christ as Lord in that business. One way to summarize this success goal is to say that business workplace colleagues in the other culture will have a business culture that is really their own and a Christ who is really their own. This is the basis of what we want others to find and have, to gain Christ together with us, foreigners, in their own culture. It is considerable work for us to understand what their culture of business is. Will you rise to embrace this serious challenge in order to deeply root the gospel in the business life of a non-American culture? What's required of you? Here's some things that are required of you. Self-understanding in terms of you as an American cultural being. Self-denial. Some values, processes, and ways that are dear to you, you will need to yield those in some way, some piece of yourself in order to interact there. New understanding of Christ's humility in the process of making you his disciple. When he came to be with you, with us, you will need new understandings of Christ's humility. What is required of you? Relating to humans ahead of doing tasks that lead to transactions, deals, products, and market success. What is required of you? Asking questions while withholding judgment and analysis until you learn answers that are not merely about knowledge, but about what's behind cultural encounters and encounters among people. Time is required of you, and moving slowly. Study and reflection is required of you within the culture. Carry with you a view to shared success, where collaboration in business and life is a better way than imposing your way. I urge you, seize this moment to be a learner of more of Christ. See him ahead of you. See what he's doing in the world as many come to follow Jesus.